When people think of royal love stories, few images are as powerful as the wedding of Prince Rainier III of Monaco and Grace Kelly. A handsome prince, a Hollywood star, and a tiny Mediterranean kingdom suddenly thrust into the global spotlight. To millions around the world, it looked like a fairy tale brought to life. Newspapers called it the wedding of the century. Photographs of the ceremony appeared in magazines across continents, and people believed they were witnessing the perfect union of royalty and Hollywood glamour. But behind the magnificent wedding dress, the royal ceremonies, and the glamorous photographs was a reality far more complicated than anyone could imagine. Prince Rainier's life before Grace Kelly had already been filled with responsibility and pressure. By the time he met the famous actress, he was carrying the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. What the world saw as a romantic dream was, for Rainier, the beginning of a life that would bring great happiness but also immense personal sacrifice and heartbreak. Rainier III became ruler of Monaco in 1949 following the death of his grandfather, Prince Louis II. Monaco was not the glamorous international destination people know today. Although famous for its casino and beautiful coastline, the principality faced serious economic challenges. It was a tiny state surrounded by larger powers, and its future was far from secure. Rainier understood from the very beginning that preserving Monaco's independence required strong leadership and careful planning. Unlike many people imagined, being a prince was not a life of endless luxury and leisure. Rainier spent long hours studying economic reports, negotiating political agreements, and planning ways to modernize Monaco. He knew that the future of the country depended upon his decisions. Every success and every failure would affect thousands of citizens. While other young men his age enjoyed private lives away from public scrutiny, Rainier lived under constant observation. One issue worried him more than most. Monaco needed a stable royal succession. The future of the principality depended on the continuation of the ruling family. As the years passed and Rainier remained unmarried, public attention increasingly focused on his personal life. Newspapers speculated endlessly about potential brides. Every social appearance generated rumors. Every friendship was transformed into a possible romance by journalists eager for a story. Despite the pressure, Rainier remained patient. He was known as a thoughtful and reserved man who took his responsibilities seriously. Friends described him as intelligent, disciplined, and hardworking. He was not interested in marrying simply to satisfy public expectations. If he married, he wanted the decision to be meaningful. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in the United States, Grace Kelly was becoming one of Hollywood's brightest stars. Born in Philadelphia in 1929, Grace came from a successful and ambitious family. Her father, John B. Kelly Sr., was a celebrated Olympic athlete and successful businessman. From an early age, Grace displayed an interest in acting. She pursued her dream despite doubts from some family members and eventually moved to New York to study dramatic arts. Her rise to fame was extraordinary. Grace quickly established herself as one of the most talented actresses of her generation. Her elegance, beauty, and calm screen presence made her stand out in an industry filled with competition. She worked with legendary directors and starred alongside some of Hollywood's biggest names. In 1955, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress, confirming her place among the elite stars of American cinema. By the mid-1950s, Grace Kelly seemed to have everything. She possessed fame, success, wealth, and international admiration. Yet life in Hollywood was demanding. Constant publicity, professional pressures, and endless public attention often left little room for privacy. Although admired around the world, Grace sometimes expressed a desire for a quieter and more meaningful life. Fate brought Prince Rainier and Grace Kelly together during the Cannes Film Festival in 1955. A meeting between the prince and the actress was arranged partly as a publicity event. At the time, nobody could have predicted how important that meeting would become. The encounter took place at the prince's palace in Monaco. Photographers captured the event, but behind the cameras, something genuine appeared to develop between the two. Following the meeting, Rainier and Grace began corresponding through letters. In an era before instant communication, letters allowed them to learn about each other gradually. Their relationship grew over the following months. Despite the distance separating them, they discovered shared values and mutual respect. When Rainier visited the United States later that year, the relationship became more serious. After spending time together and meeting Grace's family, he proposed marriage. Grace accepted. The announcement created an international sensation. The engagement united two worlds that had previously seemed completely different. One represented European royalty, tradition, and political responsibility. The other represented Hollywood, celebrity, and modern entertainment. Together they created a story that fascinated millions of people around the globe. Preparations for the wedding became a worldwide media event. Journalists followed every detail. Designers discussed the wedding dress. Newspapers reported every development. Excitement reached extraordinary levels as the wedding day approached. On April 19, 1956, Grace Kelly married Prince Rainier III in Monaco. Millions watched through television broadcasts, newsreels, and newspaper coverage. The ceremony was magnificent. Grace's wedding dress became one of the most famous dresses in history. The palace celebrations reflected centuries of royal tradition. Everywhere people looked, the event appeared perfect. Yet the wedding marked not only a beginning but also a profound transformation. Grace Kelly was no longer simply an actress. She was now Princess Grace of Monaco. Her responsibilities changed overnight. Instead of preparing for film roles, she prepared for diplomatic duties, charitable activities, and royal obligations. The transition was enormous. For Prince Rainier, marriage brought happiness and companionship. It also transformed Monaco. International attention toward the principality increased dramatically. Tourism grew. Global interest in Monaco reached levels never seen before. The marriage helped place the tiny nation firmly on the world stage. However, fame carries a price. Wherever Rainier and Grace traveled, cameras followed them. Every appearance became news. Every photograph was examined. Every decision attracted public commentary. The couple quickly learned that privacy would become one of the greatest sacrifices of their marriage. Rainier had spent much of his life avoiding unnecessary publicity. Grace had spent years living in the spotlight. Now both had to find a balance between public expectations and private reality. The challenge was not easy. As husband and wife, they needed time to build a relationship. As prince and princess, they were expected to represent Monaco at all times. The distinction between public duty and private life often disappeared. Despite these pressures, the early years of marriage brought joy. The couple welcomed 3 children, Princess Caroline in 1957, Prince Albert in 1958, and Princess Stephanie in 1965. Their growing family strengthened the future of Monaco and brought happiness to the royal household. For Rainier, the birth of his children represented more than personal joy. It ensured continuity for the principality he had worked so hard to protect. The future of Monaco now appeared secure. To the outside world, the fairy tale seemed complete. A beautiful princess, a devoted prince, a growing family, a glamorous kingdom. But beneath the surface, both Rainier and Grace faced challenges that few outsiders could fully understand. The responsibilities of royalty, the demands of public life, and the sacrifices required by their positions would continue to shape their lives for decades to come. And although neither of them knew it at the time, the greatest tragedy of Prince Rainier's life was still many years away. As the years passed, Prince Rainier and Princess Grace became one of the most admired royal couples in the world. Their photographs appeared on magazine covers from Europe to America. Whenever they attended official events, crowds gathered hoping to catch a glimpse of the glamorous princess and the prince who had married her. To outsiders, it seemed they were living a dream. But royal life often comes with burdens that remain hidden behind palace walls. For Grace, adapting to life as a princess was far more difficult than many people realized. Before her marriage, she had enjoyed a successful acting career that allowed her to express herself creatively. She worked with talented directors, traveled extensively, and pursued a profession she genuinely loved. Becoming Princess of Monaco required her to leave that world behind. The decision was not forced upon her. Grace understood the responsibilities that came with marrying a ruling prince. Yet understanding a sacrifice and living with it are two very different things. As the years went by, there were moments when she missed acting deeply. Friends noticed that she still spoke fondly about films, directors, and the creative process. She continued to support the arts whenever possible and became involved in cultural organizations. Yet there was no denying that a major chapter of her life had ended when she entered the palace. Prince Rainier understood this better than most people. He knew that Grace had given up something extraordinary in order to stand beside him. While many saw her transformation into a princess as a promotion, Rainier recognized that she had surrendered a successful career and a large degree of personal freedom. At the same time, Rainier himself faced growing responsibilities. His efforts to modernize Monaco continued throughout the 1960s and 1970s. The principality transformed dramatically under his leadership. New businesses arrived. Tourism expanded. Infrastructure improved. Monaco's reputation as an international destination grew stronger every year. Many historians credit Rainier with helping transform Monaco into one of the most prosperous places in the world. Success, however, demanded constant work. Unlike the glamorous image often associated with royalty, much of Rainier's life involved meetings, negotiations, financial planning, and administrative decisions. He carried enormous responsibility for a country whose future depended heavily on effective leadership. The pressure rarely disappeared. Every economic challenge became his problem. Every political issue demanded attention. Every major decision required careful consideration. While Grace adjusted to royal life, Rainier worked tirelessly to ensure Monaco's stability and prosperity. Yet the couple remained devoted to their family. Their children became the center of their lives. Princess Caroline, Prince Albert, and Princess Stephanie grew up under intense public attention. Like many parents, Rainier and Grace wanted to provide them with as normal a childhood as possible despite their unique circumstances. The task was not easy. As members of a royal family, the children attracted media interest from a very young age. Photographers followed their activities. Newspapers reported on their milestones. The family lived under a spotlight that never completely turned off. Despite these challenges, family life brought some of the happiest moments of Rainier's life. Photographs from the period often show the prince smiling most naturally when he was with his wife and children. Away from official duties, he appeared less like a monarch and more like a devoted husband and father. Yet even during these happier years, there were signs that royal life carried hidden costs. Grace occasionally expressed frustration with the limitations imposed by her position. She remained gracious and professional in public, but adjusting from Hollywood independence to royal protocol was not always easy. Many people assumed that palace life was glamorous every day. The reality was more complicated. Royal schedules were demanding. Public appearances required constant attention. Personal choices were often subject to public scrutiny. Privacy became increasingly rare. One of the most significant moments came in the early 1960s when legendary director Alfred Hitchcock expressed interest in working with Grace again. Hitchcock had directed Grace in several successful films and greatly admired her talent. The possibility of returning to the screen excited many of her fans. For a brief moment, it seemed that Princess Grace might once again appear in a major motion picture. The announcement generated enormous public interest. But almost immediately, controversy followed. Some people questioned whether a princess should appear in commercial films. Others argued that returning to acting would conflict with her royal responsibilities. The debate intensified rapidly. Eventually, Grace decided not to proceed with the project. The decision disappointed countless admirers around the world. More importantly, it marked the end of any realistic possibility that she would return to the profession that had made her famous. For Rainier, the situation was painful. He wanted his wife to be happy. He understood what acting meant to her. Yet he also understood the pressures created by public expectations and royal responsibilities. Like many difficult decisions in their lives, there was no perfect solution. The years continued to pass. Monaco flourished. The royal family remained internationally admired. From a distance, everything seemed stable. But time has a way of changing every story. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Prince Rainier had spent decades building his nation. His children were growing older and beginning to establish their own identities. Grace remained beloved throughout the world and continued her charitable work with remarkable dedication. No one imagined how suddenly everything would change. September 1982 began like many other months. Official engagements continued. Family matters occupied attention. Life moved forward normally. Then came the day that would forever divide Rainier's life into two parts, before and after Grace. On September 13, 1982, Princess Grace was traveling with her daughter Stephanie on a winding mountain road above Monaco. Something went terribly wrong. The vehicle left the road and plunged down a steep hillside. Emergency services responded immediately. News spread quickly throughout Monaco and then around the world. People struggled to comprehend what had happened. The beloved princess who had captivated generations was now fighting for her life. Doctors worked desperately. Family members gathered. An entire nation waited for updates. Prince Rainier faced the worst nightmare of his life. For years he had managed national crises, economic challenges, and political problems. None of those experiences prepared him for this moment. He was not acting as a ruler. He was acting as a husband watching the woman he loved struggle for survival. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Despite every effort by medical professionals, Princess Grace's injuries proved too severe. On September 14, 1982, she passed away. She was only 52 years old. The news shocked the world. Millions who had followed her story for decades mourned her loss. Tributes arrived from every corner of the globe. Political leaders expressed condolences. Hollywood figures shared memories. Ordinary people left flowers and messages outside the palace. But while the world grieved, no one felt the loss more deeply than Prince Rainier. The fairy tale that had begun in 1956 had ended in tragedy. For 26 years, Grace had been more than a princess. She had been his partner, his closest companion, the mother of his children, the person who understood the unique pressures of his life better than anyone else. Now she was gone. And for Prince Rainier, the hardest chapter of his life was only beginning. When Princess Grace died on September 14, 1982, the world lost a beloved actress, princess, and humanitarian. But for Prince Rainier III, the loss was far more personal. He had not simply lost a public figure admired by millions. He had lost the woman who had shared 26 years of his life, stood beside him during moments of triumph and difficulty, and helped transform Monaco into an internationally recognized symbol of elegance and prestige. In the days following her death, Monaco fell into mourning. Flags were lowered. Businesses closed. Thousands gathered to pay their respects. Messages of sympathy arrived from presidents, kings, queens, celebrities, and ordinary people across the globe. The funeral drew international attention, but behind the official ceremony stood a grieving husband trying to come to terms with an unimaginable loss. Observers who attended the funeral noticed the profound sadness on Rainier's face. Throughout his life, he had been known as a disciplined and composed leader. He rarely displayed strong emotions in public. Yet during those difficult days, the pain was impossible to hide. For many people, grief gradually fades with time. For Prince Rainier, it never truly disappeared. After Grace's death, something changed within him. Friends, advisors, and palace staff later described a man who became noticeably quieter. Although he continued performing his duties as sovereign prince, many believed a part of him had been lost forever. The palace itself felt different. For decades, Grace had filled its halls with energy, warmth, and activity. She organized cultural events, supported charities, encouraged artistic programs, and brought life wherever she went. Without her presence, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Visitors often remarked that Monaco remained beautiful, prosperous, and successful, yet there was a sense that something important was missing. Rainier felt that absence every day. He immersed himself in work more deeply than ever before. Public duties, government meetings, economic planning, and international affairs occupied much of his time. Work became both a responsibility and a refuge. But even work could not replace companionship. Every room in the palace contained memories. Every photograph reminded him of the life they had shared. Every public ceremony highlighted the empty space beside him. Many widowers eventually seek new relationships. Prince Rainier never did. Years passed, then decades. Despite being one of the most eligible royal figures in Europe, he never remarried. The decision fascinated journalists and historians. Speculation appeared constantly in newspapers and magazines. Some wondered whether he might eventually find another partner. Others suggested political advantages that a second marriage could provide. None of it happened. Rainier remained devoted to Grace's memory. People close to him often said that he continued speaking about her long after her death. He preserved photographs, personal items, and memories of their life together. For him, Grace was not merely part of the past. She remained part of his daily life. One reason the loss affected him so deeply was that Grace had become much more than a wife. She had become an essential part of Monaco's identity. When she arrived in Monaco in 1956, the principality was already known internationally, but her presence elevated its profile to extraordinary levels. Through her elegance, intelligence, and global fame, she attracted attention that no advertising campaign could ever purchase. Tourists came to see Monaco because of its beauty. Many came because of Grace Kelly. Her story fascinated generations. The Hollywood actress who became a princess represented a dream that seemed almost impossible. Rainier understood the impact she had made. He also understood that no one could ever replace her. As the years moved forward, his children gradually assumed larger public roles. Princess Caroline became increasingly active in charitable and cultural activities. Prince Albert prepared for the responsibilities he would one day inherit. Princess Stephanie pursued her own path while remaining a visible member of the royal family. Watching his children mature brought Rainier pride. Yet it also reminded him of how much time had passed since Grace's death. Family celebrations continued. National events continued. Life continued. But the absence remained. Meanwhile, Rainier's achievements as ruler became increasingly apparent. Under his leadership, Monaco experienced remarkable economic growth. The principality developed into one of the wealthiest places in the world. Its financial sector expanded, tourism flourished, and international prestige increased dramatically. The transformation was extraordinary. When Rainier inherited Monaco in 1949, few could have predicted how successful the nation would become. By the beginning of the 21st century, his accomplishments were recognized internationally. Historians praised his vision. Economists praised his reforms. Political leaders praised his stability and leadership. Yet even these achievements could not erase personal sorrow. The tragedy of Prince Rainier's life was not political failure. It was not economic hardship. It was not royal scandal. It was loss. The loss of the person who had shared his journey through the most important years of his life. As he grew older, his health gradually declined. The demands of decades spent governing a nation began to take their toll. Public appearances became less frequent. His children increasingly assisted with official responsibilities. Prince Albert, in particular, assumed a greater role as the future ruler of Monaco. Even during these later years, Rainier remained committed to his duties. Responsibility had defined his entire life. From the moment he became prince, he viewed service to Monaco as his primary obligation. That commitment never faded. Yet those who saw him in private often sensed that his happiest years had ended long ago. The vibrant optimism that characterized the early years of his marriage never fully returned. He carried on because duty required it. He carried on because Monaco depended on him. But the loneliness remained. In April 2005, Prince Rainier III passed away at the age of 81. His death marked the end of one of the longest reigns in modern European history. Around the world, tributes celebrated his achievements. Articles highlighted his transformation of Monaco. Documentaries examined his leadership. Political figures praised his dedication. But beyond the official accomplishments stood a deeply human story. A young prince had met a Hollywood actress. They had fallen in love. Together they built a family. Together they transformed a nation. Together they became symbols of romance and elegance admired around the world. Then tragedy separated them. What makes Prince Rainier's story so moving is not the glamour, the palace, or the royal titles. It is the fact that despite all his wealth, influence, and power, he could not protect the person he loved most. For 23 years after Grace's death, he lived without her. He never remarried. He never replaced her. He never stopped honoring her memory. In the end, the greatest tragedy of Prince Rainier's life was not becoming a prince. It was losing the princess who had become the center of his world. The world remembers their wedding as a fairy tale. History remembers their reign as a success. But perhaps the most revealing chapter came after the cameras disappeared and the crowds went home. A prince spent the final decades of his life carrying the memory of a woman he never forgot. And in that quiet devotion lies the true story of Prince Rainier and Grace Kelly. A story not simply of royalty, fame, or glamour, but of love, loss, and a bond that endured long after death itself.